Da Dang. Chapter 52. By the time Xie Yulu returned to Nanjing, the days were already freezing cold. The cold in Nanjing felt different from that in Beijing, for it was gloomy and damp, like needles piercing into the bones. He entered the city via Taiping Gate and walked straight toward Xi'an Gate. Just as he reached the eastern wall screen, he felt someone suddenly tugged at him from behind. It was a vagrant, a blade of grass between his teeth, shouting loudly, "Isn't this the guy who kissed the eunuch's arse from the weaving and sewing bureau?" Hastily and apprehensively, Xie Yulu tried to move away, but more and more passers-by were now gathering around him, all joining in the jeering, "Yes, yes. He is that damned dog." They closed in on him. Xie Yulu sensed a sudden surge of fear in his heart, the type of fear one would feel when one became a target of public condemnation. "What do you want? Oh yeah, you still dare to yell?" The vagrant who started it slapped him fiercely on the cheeks. "Let's teach him a lesson." Before Xie Yulu could explain, he was drowned in a hail of fists raining down on him. In fact, most owners of the fists didn't even know him. They were simply here to join the crowd, even treating everything here just as a game. "You eunuch's dog!" they screamed and growled in madness. "You who harmed us folks! You bastard whose son shall have no assholes!" Xie Yulu hugged his head under his arms to avoid the kicks and punches. He saw no way out of such a violent outburst coming from the rage of common folks. Could he claim he was wronged? No, he wasn't wronged. He had indeed been protecting Liao Jixiang, and naturally, that made him a part of the eunuch's faction. Batch after batch of common folks only gradually dispersed after letting out all their anger, and only after lying on the ground for a long while did Xie Yulu finally gather some strength to stand up, wiping the blood stain off from himself. The corners of his mouth and his eyes were all broken, but that was nothing, he thought, as he staggered toward his home. As he passed Suanjin Bridge, all the passers-by avoided him, yet they would then turn around to stare as Xie Yulu walked away from them. Feeling somewhat dizzy, Xie Yulu's legs weakened, making him collapse at the end of the bridge. When he looked up, he saw a beggar woman sitting in front of him. She was wrapped in tattered cloth and holding a large xian sui, her words articulated and emotional as she sang. "I saw the clouds covering the moon. I heard the wind toying with the iron bells. The sound and the sight both called out my sorrow. Lighting my silver lamp, I longed to write my heart's troubles. Yet with a long sigh, I eventually blew it out." Note: xian sui is a musical instrument with 3 strings. Xie Yulu stared at her, looking at her intently as he wiped away the blood from his eyes. "Wang Lu'er," he tried to call out. Suddenly, the woman turned her face towards him. It was really her. Xie Yulu approached her rather enthusiastically. I am Xie Yulu." Yet Wang Lu'er recoiled. Clearly, she didn't recognize the name. In excitement, Xie Yulu didn't notice her movements at first and kept on approaching. Her eyes were still blind, and her face was covered in dust and mud. On the ground in front of her was a wooden bowl, with only a few coins inside. He asked in confusion, "What happened to you?" She remained expressionless as she gathered her things to leave. Only then did Xie Yulu notice that under her filthy, ragged clothes, her belly was round and huge. She was about 5 or 6 months pregnant. "Wait." With one hand, Xie Yulu reached out to pull her, while his other hand dived into his pocket for his remaining meager amount of money. But Wang Lu'er violently shook him off, drawing a small dagger from her sleeve and threatening him nervously. Xie Yulu hurriedly explained, I recognize you. There are many prostitutes named Wang Lu'er in Nanjing," she replied fiercely. Xie Yulu was left speechless. She seemed like she had been fooled way too many times. Is it Ruan Dian's child?" Hearing that name, her hand holding the dagger dropped, yet she kept her alertness, her head tilting slightly to the side. Xie Yulu didn't dare to move rashly. "Didn't he leave you any money?" Wang Lu'er was silent at first, then she admitted flatly, he did. She frowned as if she had recalled something sorrowful. I'm a blind woman. What can I keep by my side? She probably had all her money stolen and was chased out of her home. Feeling pity for her, Xiaolu didn't think twice. Come with me. Yet she immediately refused. I used to be a prostitute but I'm not anymore. She gathered her tattered clothes closer around her and spoke with dignity. I have a man, it's just that he's dead. Xiaolu was struck by a sudden pang of shame. After a moment of hesitation, he fished out all the tiny pieces of silver he had with him, and pressed them into her hand. Don't. She refused, keeping only a few coins. Only a little at a time. Indeed, she was blind and couldn't keep her money safe. Xiaolu felt a knife twisting in his heart. Where do you live? By the bridge, she said, pointing nonchalantly to a small patch of muddy ground under the bridge. The soil there was not frozen, it was warm. Xiaolu asked with much agony, the child in your belly, can it bear this? Life or death, she said, is up to the heavens above. Then, with those coins in her palms, she carried her xianzi and the wooden bowl and brushed past Xiaolu. Thank you, she said softly as she left. Xiaolu watched as she put her arm and weight on the railing and slowly descended the bridge. As for how she went under the bridge, and how she curled up and settled on that patch of mud, he couldn't bear to watch. Dragging his feet, he carried on. Down the Suanjin Bridge was West Outer Avenue, right at the intersection of Santiago Lane. He saw a group of stonemasons pulling ropes to erect a monument, which was carved out of a large block of grey stone even taller than a grown man. As he passed by, he heard the onlookers murmuring. Isn't that a joke? What merits does he have? He arrested Liao Jixiang, that's something for the common folks. For the common folks? There isn't a single good eunuch in this world. So, it is Zheng Xian's monument. Xiaolu turned around for a brief glance. A monument erected while someone was still alive was not worth much attention. With his back hunched, he stumbled away. First, he went to his own small courtyard. It was still the same fence and the same door, yet it housed new occupants now. Through the door, he could hear the laughter of playful children and remembered De Tien. Is the leek field still there? He wondered, and all those orchids, dianthus, and crabapple he had personally planted, have they all withered? From there, he went on to the courtyard that Liao Jixiang had purchased for him, which was very close. Not long ago, he was still treading this path every night. But now, while the road stayed the same, the scenery unchanged, his state of mind was completely different. He knocked on the door and was surprised that someone actually answered. It was the same old man. He opened the door and recognized him, then he asked as he peered at the bloodstains on Xiaolu's face, why didn't you come here for so long? Xiaolu hesitated for a long time before finally stepping over the threshold. The moment he entered the tiny courtyard, all the past sufferings and sorrow surged in his heart and swelled in his eyes. He choked slightly as he uttered, from now on, I'm not leaving again. After washing and having a simple meal, the sky turned dark, so he blew out the lamp and went to bed. Just as he tucked himself in, he heard someone knocking on the door. The old man answered it and soon returned to inform him, a man surnamed Chu. Xiaolu was momentarily taken aback. He then got up and draped his clothes over his shoulders. When the old man led the visitor in, he shined the lamp over him and saw that it was indeed Chu Feng. It's been quite some time. Those were Chu Feng's first words. He had changed much. Xiaolu was surprised when he looked at him. Chu Feng now had a mustache, apparently trimmed and maintained with care. He had a calm and dignified air about him, appearing very much like a real leader. Xiaolu set down the lamp and casually sat on the edge of the bed. How did you know I was back? I have many eyes. Chu Feng said, sitting at the table opposite him. It's impossible not to know about anything that happened in Nanjing. Xia Yulo nodded. Chu Feng was probably referring to the beating he received at the eastern wall screen. How did you know about this place? Chu Feng smiled, a peaceful, calm smile. During Xia Yulo's days away from Nanjing, he had aged, like a young tree now covered behind a layer of old weathered bark. I went door to door in this alley to find you. Xia Yulo nodded again. And Chu Feng said, aren't you going to pour me a cup of water? Only then did Xia Yulo remember. So, he got up to pour him some tea. When he handed Chu Feng the tea, he noticed that his right thumb had limited mobility. What happened to your hand? A knife cut. Chu Feng said calmly, sipping his tea. From someone Zhang Xian hired. An assassination. Xia Yulo glared at him, yet Chu Feng waved it off nonchalantly. It's nothing. It happens about once or twice a month. Xia Yulo sat down beside him. They were now parted by a lamp in between. Is he still holding a grudge? Not entirely. Chu Feng looked at him from the other side of the lamp. The warm yellowish light was now slashing across his face, casting it half in the shadows. With Liao Jixiang gone, it's either him or me in Nanjing. You're no match for him. My father is with Qi Wan. Chu Feng interrupted. Old ginger is always spicier, he laughed, lightly patting his own thigh. When Qi Wan came to Nanjing for the tribute, my father secretly visited him. Now I'm 5th ranked. That would indeed intimidate Zhang Xian from acting rashly. Xia Yulo was silent. While Chu Feng is growing under Qi Wan's favor, isn't Qi Wan also using him? Liao Jixiang, Chu Feng suddenly asked, his eyes focusing elsewhere. Whether he didn't care to look at him or didn't dare to look, Xia Yulo knew not. He's in the Directorate of Ceremonies, Xia Yulo answered, his mouth suddenly feeling dry, so he poured himself a cup of tea as well. Attending to His Majesty. Poof. Chu Feng abruptly blew out the lamp. In the sudden darkness that descended upon them, he whispered, you and him. Xia Yulo didn't care to hide anything at all. We are together. Chu Feng was silent. He waited for a long time before cautiously asking again, like close friends, chatting, writing calligraphy, and reciting poetry. Like husband and wife, Xia Yulo denied his dignified guess, intimately touching, kissing, and spending our lives as one. And so Chu Feng fell silent again. In the darkness, Xia Yulo sensed the figure opposite him seemed to be shaking. Frightened, he asked. Or disgusted? Yet the figure across from him displayed only confusion and helplessness. Chu Feng paused and then changed his reply, I don't know. After he spoke, he stood up and said farewell. Even when he was stepping out of the door, he kept on repeating, if you need anything, come to me. Anything. After Xia Yulo saw him off, he went back inside to sleep. All of a sudden, he realized that his life now had become very simple. Those fame and fortune, the schemes between factions and parties, the assassinations, none of it concerned him anymore. He could live without any distractions. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Chu Feng sat down in his sedan chair. As soon as the curtain to the sedan chair fell securely in place, he shut his eyes in pain. The attendant outside asked, Master, should we head back? He ordered listlessly, his furrowed brows carving deep in his forehead as he leaned against the seat. Drowsiness arose as he gently rocked in the chair, and all this while, his mind was only replaying Xia Yulo's words, we are together, intimately touching, kissing, and spending our lives as one. Grabbing onto the armrest tightly, Chu Feng felt sweat beading on his forehead. He didn't know how much time had passed before the attendant outside called out, Tur. Master. He woke up startled. Ahh. Shivering, he saw pale moonlight that shone on his face. He lifted his hand to block it, and saw the attendant lifting the curtain from outside. Master, we are home. and so, Chu Feng got out of the sedan chair. The time was just past midnight. The sedan chair had stopped at his courtyard, and in front of the door, there were two young maids standing on each side, waiting to help him with the curtain and removing his outer coat. As he entered, they said, "Madam hasn't slept yet, she's been waiting for you. Tell her to sleep." Chu Feng didn't even wait for them to finish. As he entered, he directly turned and headed not to the main chamber but to the small room on the east wing, where he had personally set up a meditation room. Upon entering the meditation room, he closed the door. The room was not spacious, at most 5 steps wide in any direction. On the wall to the north was a small altar, upon which held no bodhisattva or the 3 pure ones, but only a nameless, plain tablet. Like his usual routine every morning and evening, he lit 3 sticks of incense from a candle flame, blew on them gently, and placed them steadily in the incense burner. He didn't act like he was worshipping a divine being or the Buddha. Rather, he seemed peaceful and calm, as if he was with a friend or a close family. Opposite the small altar was a large chair, where he sat down without a word, staring blankly into space. Outside, his wife was complaining, "What's wrong with him, spending every day in that room, leaving me?" Her voice was mixed with sobs. "Tell him. I don't want to live anymore." Yet Chu Feng only stared into the void as if he had heard nothing. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It came from his attendant. "Sir, the society has a message that the items have been delivered." Chu Feng didn't move the slightest. He remained in his trance, lazily blinking his eyes, and said, "Noted. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Dugong, this has just arrived." A junior eunuch was slightly bending and fanning the brazier for Zheng Xian. The brazier was full of new coal, burning so brightly that the core was glowing red and the outer layer turning pale. "It's good coal, Dugong. Just smell the smoke, it doesn't choke people at all." Zheng Xian was lying on the couch with his precious son in his arms. He watched the brazier and noted that there was indeed little smoke. "What's it called?" "Red basket coal," answered the junior eunuch eagerly, waving the fan. "It's a tribute from the south. If we like it, they'll offer us more." It was the middle of the night, so the child was fast asleep, yet Zheng Xian intentionally pinched his cheeks to tease him. "Come on, my dear babe, is this coal good? If you like it, Adi will burn it for you every day." The child pouted, kicking his little legs and tiny feet as if he was about to cry. Seeing this, Zheng Xian laughed heartily, cupping his son's cheeks and kissing him loudly. Just then, another junior eunuch came to report that Tu Yao had arrived. Zheng Xian put his son down with much reluctance, draped on a robe, and went outside. Tu Yao was waiting below the steps. Seeing him, he respectfully called, "Dugong." Ever since Tu Yao had let Xie Yu go, Zheng Xian had been holding grudges against Tu Yao. He maintained a stern face and said, "Speak." Words from the capital. Tu Yao was also aware that Zheng Xian no longer trusted him, so he spoke slowly and his mind at ease. "Liao Jixiang has been transferred to the Directorate of Ceremonies. He's still 4th ranked and serving as the attendant eunuch." Of course, Zheng Xian's tongue licked over his teeth, his expression hard to describe, as if he was both relieved and deeply envious. Even when he's crippled, he's never forgotten. Bang! A loud crash came from behind. The door was abruptly pushed open from the inside as the junior eunuch fell out, landing on the threshold and coughing violently. In between the coughs, he even began to vomit. End chapter. Da-dang. Chapter 53. It was the last month of the lunar year, and the 21st day after the funeral of Zheng Xian's son. Leading the Jinyi Wei in person, Zheng Xian and his men surrounded Chu Feng's residence. It was rare for him to wear his heavy armor and sit on horseback. In front of the horse stood a junior eunuch dressed in white, neck stretching forward and shouting, "Chu Feng! You conspired against our dugong with despicable schemes. You caused the demise of our young master. Today, you will pay with your blood. Just like last time when Tu Yao came to surround the residence, the main gate of the Chu residence was tightly shut. Yet unlike the last time, there were a row of crossbowmen perching on the tall walls, and everyone inside the courtyard was also fully armed. Those were Chu Feng's hired soldiers. Last time, they yelled to invite Tu Yao in for a cup of tea, but this time, they shouted, "Who said we were plotting against you lot? You decided to burn the red basket coal yourself, and now you are blaming us for the death. If you want war, you shall have it." After the incident, Zheng Xian had instructed his men to investigate. Red basket coal produced much warmth with little smoke, but it could indeed suffocate people if not handled properly. He ground his teeth in frustration. The charcoal was, in truth, originally from the Yang society, which made its way into his residence after being transferred in multiple hands. He couldn't possibly swallow this humiliation. "Stop wasting time. Ram the door." When his men were about to advance with a battering ram, Tu Yao rushed forward, studying the ready crossbows on the walls and advising Zheng Xian, "Dugong, the moment we act, they will immediately release the arrows. Fuck off." Zheng Xian kicked Tu Yao away from his tall horse. "Charge." It was truly a dire situation. As the enormous battering ram charged towards Chu Residence's red gate, a huge commotion was suddenly heard and hurried footsteps came out of nowhere. The sound came from some distance away and it was accompanied by the clinking of armor. There were at least a few hundred men. Zheng Xian looked at Tu Yao, who gripped his long sword and glanced around in panic. "They're not our men." In less than a k, an ominous mass of armored soldiers poured in from both sides of the road. They were led by Senior Jin Yiwei, their long swords ready and gleaming, encircling Zheng Xian's men in the middle. "Who are you?" Zheng Xian was stunned as he shouted furiously. Naturally, the soldiers' lips were sealed. They stood sternly without making a sound. Feigning control of the situation, Zheng Xian shouted again, "What piece of filth dares to go against me in Nanjing? Come out and show this one your face." After a brief silence, the soldiers on the east side suddenly parted in storming steps, forming a narrow path between their raised weapons. From the path emerged a man on horseback. It was a Dedang whose robe was luxuriously embroidered with golden pythons that glittered under the sun. Zheng Xian immediately dismounted, frowning as he looked over. In a moment, he recognized the man. Out of sheer shock, he spat out a name through clenched teeth, Qiu Luan. Qiu Luan was the favorite of Qi Wan, a fourth-ranked eunuch who had been in charge of the imperial household department. "Uncle." Qiu Luan greeted Zheng Xian by their relationship in the family. They were in fact about the same age, and had once been acquaintances in the palace. The man was strikingly handsome and spirited, with shiny white teeth that glittered when he smiled, exuding a cold, sharp air. Despite his pounding heart, Zheng Xian still managed a smile as he welcomed him. The man and his horse slowly approached Zheng Xian amidst the cold gleam of long sword. Without dismounting, Qiu Luan sat assuredly on the horse and looked down at him. "This nephew came without first informing uncle. My apologies." He clearly came with hostile intentions. Zheng Xian coldly smiled back, "Of course you can come, but why bring so many men? Lao Zuzong says that Nanjing is not safe." Qiu Luan leaned down from his horse, seemingly friendly but actually patting Zheng Xian's shoulder with utmost disrespect, "and he's worried that I might be bullied." Zheng Xian laughed out loud, "With uncle here, how could you be bullied?" Qiu Luan laughed as well. Then, "Uncle," he kept his waist bent, lifting a booted foot and wildly placing it on the edge of the saddle like a Tartar, "where is the weaving and sewing bureau? Care to point the way for this nephew?" The weaving and sewing bureau. Zheng Xian shuddered. He was here to take over Liao Jixiang's position. "Oh," after he spoke, Qiu Luan looked up, staring at the Chu residence and the row of crossbowmen waiting on the walls. Whose house is this? Zheng Xian's eyes widened with rage. Qiu Luan had brought so many soldiers with him, how could he not know who was inside? It belongs to Minister Chu of the Ministry of Rights. Then I must pay him a visit. Qiu Luan didn't even let him finish before he spurred his horse towards the Red Gate. From his armed soldiers quickly emerged 2 rows of riders that followed him tightly. They were dressed in embroidered uniform, his personal guards. Zheng Xian watched as they knocked on the gate. Soon, all the crossbowmen waiting on the wall retreated, and the gate opened wide. Shaking his reins, Qiu Luan rode in casually. However, his soldiers remained where they were, standing in attention. Tu Yao ran up from behind, whispering in Zheng Xian's ear, "Du Gong, are we still breaking in?" Zheng Xian turned around, glaring at the Chu residents, his eyes red with hatred, as he ordered, "Withdraw. Head back." ******. On the day before the Lunar New Year, Qiu Luan hosted a grand banquet at his mansion. He invited every notable official in Nanjing, those in the civil departments as well as those in the military, except for Zheng Xian. What surprised Xia Yulo the most was that while he was sitting idle at home writing Spring Festival couplets, a junior eunuch knocked on his door and delivered an invitation for him. At the beginning, he didn't plan to attend. Yet as the stipulated time approached, he was surprised to find that Qiu Luan actually sent a sedan chair to pick him up. Despite his repeated emphasis that he had hung up his official's hat, the junior eunuch remained polite but insistent. Reluctantly, he got into the sedan chair. Qiu Luan's new mansion was located on Lufei Lane, an extremely bustling place. The mansion had red lanterns hanging at the entrance and freshly painted walls. Upon entering, servants approached to guide Xia Yulo to the banquet. Xia Yulo took a seat at the far end from the main seats and he saw Chu Feng from a distance, sitting at the main table in high spirits. He was late and by the time he was seated, most of the guests had already arrived. Soon, the host emerged from the back of the hall. All eunuchs enjoyed grandiose things, and Qiu Luan was no exception. Today, he made his appearance with a bright red robe with full floral embroideries, and behind him were a dozen Jin Yue guards. Their embroidered uniform were all colorful in their own way. Following their master, they helped him hold his eagles, lead his dogs and even carried a few quails. Qiu Luan claimed that quail fighting was his favorite. Before the banquet began, he ordered a round of quail fight to cheer up the guests. As soon as the 2 birds were released, all the guests witnessed the bloodshed. In the middle of the hall, the birds blatantly tore each other's feathers off, which landed everywhere. All the high-ranked officials present were gravely embarrassed. Meanwhile, a few sycophants who were overly confident in their intellect, raised their cups to toast Qiu Luan on his appointment as Nanjing's new chief of the Weaving and Sewing Bureau. Qiu Luan rolled his eyes and glanced at them. "I spent 30,000 taels of gold to ascend to immortality," he sneered nonchalantly. "Do I need your congratulations?" In an instant, the banquet fell silent. Qiu Luan's temperament was nothing like Liao Jixiang or Zheng Xian. He dared to make moves, dared to speak his mind and dared to be unconventional. Every guest was now exchanging uneasy glances. As they looked at those fighting, bloody quails, fear became even more prominent in their hearts. Then, they heard soft footsteps approaching from outside. As if being released from heavy fetters, they all looked towards the entrance. It was the entertainers, dressed in colorful robes with narrow sleeves, their hair adorned with extensive jewelries of jade and silver. Among them was Guo Xiaozhou, who was very inconspicuous. The person leading the dancers was Yu Jiazai, the most popular entertainer of the season. He had a delicate face and eyes that dripped of intimate temptations. The scholars even praised him with Emperor Jianwen's poem, Ode to Toy Boys. His hair wears emerald branches with a hint of red. His gorgeous face brighter than the dawn above. His sleeve tailored from the finest brocade. And his garments woven with flowers of love. Now he emerges, red-robed and agile. Now he turns, his hair dangling loose. He has eyes that smile when he's lax. And his jade hand suddenly plucks flowers. Smiling ever so brightly, Yu Jiazai sat down right next to Qiu Luan. Leaning softly to Qiu Luan's side, he was taken into an embrace around the waist. Du Gong, he whispered with intimate tenderness, please be kind and love this one. Qiu Luan didn't respond. He studied Guo Xiaozhou for a moment and beckoned him over. Unlike his usual look in the past, Guo Xiaozhou's attire was now much more plain and modest. He gathered his skirt as he approached with his head kept low, and took a seat on the other side of Qiu Luan. After that was drinking and eating. Feeling that nothing else was imminent, Xia Yulo stood up to leave. At this moment, Qiu Luan suddenly uttered, about what I hate the most, he asked Yu Jiazai, do you want to guess what it is? Yu Jiazai shook his head. So, Qiu Luan cupped his chin and smiled cheerfully like the stars above, I hate entertainers the most. Yu Jiazai's expression instantly stiffened. Qiu Luan's hand was large. He even had calluses on his middle fingers, which seemed to be the result from years of experience with a bow. That large hand covered Yu Jiazai's head, clamping it and shaking it from side to side. Do you know why? Yu Jiazai trembled, and no, I don't. Qiu Luan looked up at his guests, because an entertainer's tongue is always loose. This one here, his hand tightened around Yu Jiazai's temples, is Zhang Xian's ear. After he spoke, his hand suddenly moved, slamming Yu Jiazai's face down onto the table, causing a loud bang. On the other side, Guo Xiaozhou kept his eyes lowered and his face expressionless. With the same hand, Qiu Luan grabbed his head as well, and this one here, he gently stroked the back of Guo Xiaozhou's head, why don't you tell them yourself? Deep down, Guo Xiaozhou was still the brave Guo Xiaozhou. He turned to face Qiu Luan calmly, I am Zhang Xian's ear. Qiu Luan's white teeth were indeed dazzling. As he spoke, those teeth clanked sharply together, do you think I am as stupid as Zhang Xian? Murmurs immediately rose among the guests. Guo Xiaozhou pursed his lips and locked eyes with Qiu Luan's. He appeared less like an entertainer and more like someone who had been long dead. To be fair, Qiu Luan recognized his beauty, yet that was precisely why he planned to tear him apart. You are a spy from the Ministry of War. The crowd erupted. Everyone was utterly shocked, even Chu Feng was taken aback. Qiu Luan continued in his unhurried way, well, the minister himself is not present today. He must be afraid, he ordered, bring it forward. One of his Jin Yi presented him with a cup of dark liquid, smelling rather pungent. Qiu Luan released his grip on Guo Xiaozhou, pour it in. In front of everyone, the cup of liquid shook and tumbled until it was finally forced down Guo Xiaozhou's throat. All they heard was a broken scream, then they witnessed Guo Xiaozhou rolling down from the table and writhing on the floor, his hands clutching his throat, struggling. It was raw lacquer. Xia Yulo was stunned. Guo Xiaozhou could never speak again for the rest of his life. As the banquet concluded, Qiu Luan had firmly established his authority in Nanjing, and almost everyone left with a sense of fear and danger in their hearts. However, whatever happened here had nothing to do with Xia Yulo. As he walked out dispassionately, a young eunuch called him from behind, saying that the dugong wished to see him. And Xia Yulo went along, he had no choice. In fact, he was practically dragged to the backyard. At the door of a side chamber, he struggled and tried to explain, what are you doing? Surely this is a mistake. He was violently shoved inside, and the moment he stepped over the threshold, the door behind him was locked. He immediately turned to pull the door, shouting, this is outrageous. Is there no longer laws? In a Dadang's household, what law could there be? After shouting for a while in vain, Xia Yulo turned around and what came to his view made his jaw drop. Red tablecloths. Red candles. Even the canopy bed was draped in red. On the table was a flagon of wine, and there were buckets of hot water by the basin. This is clearly a wedding chamber. Creak. He heard something coming from the bed, as if someone was turning over. Xie Yulu was appalled. Qiuluan has arranged a woman for him. Why? Like a devoted man receiving no answers from his plea to the gods above, he felt so helpless. After pacing around the room like an ant on a hot pan, he saw no solution and eventually went back to the door. Open up! Open the door! He stomped his feet and shouted, "Let me out!" The sounds from the bed grew louder, rustling, like fabrics being taken off. Xie Yulu cried out, "Miss," he wiped away beads of sweat on his forehead, "you. Please respect yourself." The bed fell silent for a moment, then resumed its movements. This time, he heard the sound of tidying up the bedding. Gathering his courage, Xie Yulu approached the person in the bed. I have to be honest," he stopped from a decent distance. "I have a wife. I cannot be with you." The bed immediately went silent. Afraid that she might have heard how he was alone, Xie Yulu quickly added, "Yes, my love is not in Nanjing right now, but I am faithfully waiting. Do you understand?" The bed remained quiet, producing not a single sound. Thinking he had convinced her, Xie Yulu seized the moment. "You should go. Go tell your dugong about it, and let me go now." Suddenly, a short, faint cough came from the bed. It was so soft that it could have been mist should one's mind wander elsewhere, yet it stirred something in Xie Yulu's heart. He took a hurried step forward, then he stopped, standing there like a fool, questioning the ridiculousness of his guess. Staring at the red canopy, he almost said, "Yang." Not daring to finish, he continued cautiously, "Miss, He shifted closer, gripping the red fabric with his throat dry from apprehension. "Forgive my rudeness." As the curtain slowly lifted, he saw the dimly lit space behind. It was filled with the intoxicating scent of ambergris, and there was only a single blanket in the dark shadows. Beneath it lay a person, long-haired, facing the wall. From the exposed shoulder, Xie Yulu knew that she must be completely naked. "Miss," he couldn't see anything clearly, and not daring to climb onto the bed, Xie Yulu held onto the bed frame and attempted to lean in. He touched the shoulder, and while he did so, he kept reassuring himself that he was only looking, therefore not betraying Yang Chun. The person was turned over under his hand. A noticeably concave face, delicate double eyelids, and lips like a bodhisattva's. Probably out of shyness, he wasn't directly looking at him. Yet his eyes were overflowing with affection. In that instant, Xie Yulu was so shocked that he let go of the bed curtains, which closed with a swish. When his senses finally returned to him after a while, he immediately went to remove the candle on the table. Holding it in both hands, he went back to the bed for another look. Under the warm glow of the lotus-embroidered canopy, the beauty was revealed under the light. As Liao Jixiang retreated with his eyes squinting at the light, Xie Yulu closed in with the red candle, watching as he shyly curled up under the blanket, commanding in his lofty tone, "Blow it out." "It's him, it really is him." Even when the scalding hot wax dripped onto Xie Yulu's hands, he believed it was nothing compared to the passionate heat in his heart. "Yang Chun!" he called out incredulously, "My love! My soul!" Liao Jixiang couldn't hold back his laughter at such unreserved words. In the meantime, Xie Yulu immediately did as he was told, blowing out the candle and kicking off his shoes, then he impatiently climbed into the bed. End chapter. Dadang. Chapter 54. Despite the approach of the Spring Festival, the stage was still showing the farewell act of Yingying and Zhangsheng. Such was the characteristic of Nanjing, where everyone shared a bit of a scholar's melancholic tendencies in their bones. Under the clear blue sky with clouds, over the yellow flowers on the ground, I felt the west wind blowing strong, and I saw the wild geese fly south. The song came from an amateur troupe, where the singers did not even wear proper hats, their voices half choking in the wind. Who has dyed the frosted maple forest red at dawn? Must have been the tears of parting love. Among layer after layer of people watching the play, Xia Yulu discreetly groped Liao Jixiang's hand, making both of them tremble, and stole glances at each other due to their desire to look and dread to be found out by the crowd. They were standing together under broad daylight, in a way that Xia Yulu would never have dared to imagine before. Last night, at Qiu Luan's mansion, in the ambiguous glow of the red bed canopy, they held onto each other like fools all night long. It wasn't because they were at someone else's house, but rather, they didn't actually want to do anything too intimate. For all they wanted was to press their bodies against each other and shed all the bitter tears they had accumulated along the tortuous journey. As hot tears slid down their cheeks and seeped into the pillow covered with red silk, Xia Yulu cupped his palm over Liao Jixiang's shoulder, his fingers moving upwards, wanting to touch the scar where Liao Jixiang had pierced through. Yet he didn't expect to feel a large patch of rough scars, still coarse and uneven, apparently not fully healed. Probably due to the pain, Liao Jixiang let out a soft groan. Xia Yulu propped himself up to take a closer look. He couldn't see things clearly under the dim light of the canopy, but he vaguely observed that there was not an inch of uninjured skin from behind Liao Jixiang's ear to his shoulder. Liao Jixiang didn't move, letting him check everything, and then asked, "Were you scared?" No wonder. How could Liao Jixiang have single-handedly stood against the most powerful man of the kingdom, and still be able to come back to him? Xia Yulu couldn't possibly imagine what had happened, nor did he dare to imagine it at all. He could only grit his teeth, silently swallowing the agony and resentment in his heart. "Do you think it's ugly?" Seeing how quiet Xia Yulu was, Liao Jixiang asked tremulously. Xia Yulu held him tighter in his arms. "How did it happen?" After a moment of silence, Liao Jixiang said, "I am now nothing. Not even better than a junior eunuch in a Dedang's household." He seemed very at peace with it. "His Majesty sent me to the Xiaoling mausoleum of the founding emperor, to be an incense servant as punishment." Since he was unwilling to say more, Xia Yulu didn't press further. For a eunuch, being an incense servant was like an imperial concubine being sent to the cold palace. Guarding a desolate mausoleum for a lifetime meant he would never find a chance to climb up again. Liao Jixiang had truly abandoned everything to be with him. "We still have that courtyard," Liao Jixiang said with much levity, his head resting against Xia Yulu's shoulder. "We can plow a small vegetable field. Although my stipend is meager, it is enough for a frugal life. And I will go to the school and teach young children." Xia Yulu allowed his imagination to wander as well, picturing their future together. "We can practice calligraphy and compose poems, and when the flowers bloom, we'll go back to the Xiaolao fountain." Eventually, Liao Jixiang fell asleep in his arms with tears still wet on his face. Xia Yulu drew the bed curtains aside and looked at him in the faint light of dawn. Then, he gently slipped out of bed. By this time, the lock on the door had already been removed. He stepped out of the chamber, found the main path and walked along it towards the north. Just as he passed the third gate in the mansion, he was stopped. "I'm looking for Du Gongqiu," he said. When they refused to let him in, he shouted with all his might. Before long, a junior eunuch ran out from inside, gesturing with his hand and letting him enter. Xia Yulu's heart was pounding when he stood in front of Qiu Luan's door. That man was ruthless and violent, and could take his life with just a flick of his finger. Suddenly, the door was pulled open from inside. The man who opened it for him was tall and strong, still in his undergarments with a loose hair bun, as if he had just gotten out of bed. Xia Yulu had seen him at the banquet and knew he was probably one of the Jin Yue. As he walked past him, he saw Qiu Luan sitting majestically on the edge of the bed, his hair disheveled and his hands on his hips, his eyebrows tilting upwards as he glared towards the door in anger. Once inside, Xia Yulu became rather embarrassed of himself. "Du Gong, this one apologizes for disturbing you." Since they were not acquainted, Xia Yulu didn't know where to start. Liao Jixiang, his neck is injured. Qiu Luan rolled his eyes, I thought you were here to thank me. Xia Yulu immediately said, thank you so much. Yet after hesitating for a moment, Xia Yulu frowned, his lips trembling, he's badly wounded, he gestured on his own neck, from here, to here. The loudness of his heartache was too much for Qiu Luan. Enough, he raised his hand to stop him, my only task is to deliver him here while I arrive at my new position. He also doesn't need to serve in Xiaoling Mausoleum. Just take him directly with you. This was a huge favor, yet Xia Yulu still didn't leave. Du Gong, he looked towards Qiu Luan timidly, I just want to know, how did he get injured? You want to know? Qiu Luan was furious, suddenly standing up from the bed. Even Lao Zuzong doesn't know, let alone me. Xia Yulu was intimidated and took a step back, yet he persevered in his pursuit, how can you not know? You were both in the palace. Qiu Luan had heard that Xia Yulu was a fool in love, but he didn't expect him to be this annoying. When he was ready to summon his Jin Yi Wei and throw him out, Xia Yulu poured his heart out, he was injured for me. He has such a large scar. Just looking at it shatters my heart. Du Gong, please show some mercy. Qiu Luan stared at him blankly, as if he couldn't fully understand this sort of emotion, yet also somewhat empathizing with him. This ambiguity greatly agitated him. Bluntly, he said, they said he threw himself onto a brazier. Suddenly, he saw Xia Yulu's face becoming distorted in pain, as if he was the one who had fallen onto the brazier. Qiu Luan looked at him like he was looking at a fool and finally complied, at that time. He awkwardly sat back on the edge of the bed, clumsily smoothing out the wrinkles in his robe. His Majesty and him were inside the chamber, Lao Zuzong was kneeling outside in the corridor. Whatever has been said, however he got hurt, only the heavens would know besides those two. Only the heavens know. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Xia Yulu turned to look at Liao Jixiang. His fake collar was propped up high around his neck, giving him a delicate elegance. Dangling over his pointy chin was a drop of tear. Xia Yulu reached out to wipe it away, why are you crying? Liao Jixiang felt shy all of a sudden, shifting his gaze away from the stage and hastily wiped his face with his sleeve, I'm not watching anymore. After he spoke, he started to squeeze through the crowd, while Xia Yulu followed closely behind like a shadow, trying to pull him back, why don't you want to watch it, Yang Chun? The Confucius temple before the spring festival was beyond bustling. Grasping the opportunity to chase him and pull him, Xia Yulu enjoyed their closeness under the eyes of the public. Liao Jixiang sensed his feelings as he blushed and said, what are you doing in broad daylight? Xia Yulu played dumb. But you were crying, he pressed his body close to Liao Jixiang's, fiddling with his fingers, and I want to pamper you. I don't need you to do that, Liao Jixiang pushed him, you, indecent. Xia Yulu should have refuted, he should have behaved like a dignified scholar who once ranked high in the imperial examinations, but instead, he grinned mischievously and declared, I am indecent. He breathed hot air into Liao Jixiang's ear, I become indecent whenever I see you. Liao Jixiang was terribly embarrassed. Back when he was wealthy and powerful, Xia Yulu had never dared to speak like this. Now that he had fallen, this man was on his way to ride on top of him. You should know the difference between home and outside. But I no longer know anything. Xia Yulu confessed straightforwardly, when the gods above gave you back to me, I lost my ability to even distinguish being dead from living. Liao Jixiang looked up at him in astonishment. He appeared both like he didn't believe it at all and believing it too much. He immediately lowered his head, tugged on Xia Yulu's sleeve, and turned to leave. This is the way home. Xia Yulu allowed him to lead the way with their hands entwined, like how one would take a child home. While walking, he thought of an old saying of Beijing, in the whole world, there are 3 types of people you should not meddle with, daughters, scholars, and eunuchs. Indeed, he thought to himself. Once he had meddled with this eunuch, he ended up surrendering to him his entire life. Once they entered the courtyard and stepped into the room, Liao Jixiang turned and pushed Xia Yulu against the door before he could react. The light leaking through the grids of the wooden door illuminated the trembling eyelashes of Liao Jixiang. For a moment, he appeared hesitant, but in the next instant, he stood on tiptoe and kissed Xia Yulu wetly. It was still the same suckling kiss. Wanting to laugh, Xia Yulu wrapped his arms around him. Liao Jixiang was exceptionally passionate, clinging to him softly as if he was about to melt onto him, all while he kissed Xia Yulu with loud smacking sound. They had truly not been together for a long time. Xia Yulu kneaded his ass, probing for the cleft through Liao Jixiang's pants. When you were in the palace, did you miss me? Just kissing was enough to make Liao Jixiang drunk and weak in the knees. He nodded earnestly, even eagerly untied his own belt. Not only did he untie it, but he also reached down, grabbing Xia Yulu's half-hard member and clumsily rubbing it. Xia Yulu was so flattered and surprised by his passion. Nibbling Liao Jixiang's earlobe, he whispered, "It's still daytime." Liao Jixiang pressed his forehead against Xia Yulu's, shamelessly confessing, "In the palace, at night. I would tighten my thighs around the quilt and pretend it was you." Every hair on Xia Yulu's body was standing up. He asked lewdly, "Did you ever touch yourself back there?" The answer was no. Liao Jixiang shook his head immediately, and almost at the same time, Xia Yulu aimed his middle finger at his entrance. Liao Jixiang shivered, parting his legs slightly and waiting, but after 2 firm pushes, the finger didn't go in. Liao Jixiang looked backwards in disappointment. Probably out of the heated thrill, his fair buttocks were blushing brightly. He grabbed Xia Yulu's wrist and shamelessly attempted to guide his middle finger in, but to no avail, for the place was too dry. He used to open up at the gentlest touch. Liao Jixiang appeared rather anxious, and even began to dig his own finger in. "Why is it like this?" Xia Yulu immediately grabbed his hand. "Be gentle. Don't hurt yourself." After he spoke, he spat into his palm and smeared it into Liao Jixiang's hole under his intent gaze. Liao Jixiang shivered again. Before he could find time to feel shy, Xia Yulu's finger slipped inside. Once in, those lonely inner walls bit onto it tightly, spasming, twisting and tightening around it with immense force. Liao Jixiang felt it as well. Such was his own lewdness. Probably due to the torturous loneliness in the past, he couldn't help but arch his ass, tore Xia Yulu's garments open, licking and kissing Xia Yulu's chest as if he had lost his mind. "Take off my pants," Xia Yulu whispered in his ear, and Liao Jixiang immediately complied. With one hand, Liao Jixiang continued stroking Xia Yulu's sticky, massive hardness, and with the other hand, he tore his own clothes away. When both of them were naked, Xia Yulu teased Liao Jixiang by tickling his armpit. "Do you think people outside can see our shadows?" Huh. Despite how panicked Liao Jixiang looked, the moist flesh within him was twitching even more violently. He was very eager. Holding Xia Yulu's member in place, Liao Jixiang lifted his leg and tried to sit on it, but Xia Yulu stopped him. "It's still too tight." "No, it's not," Liao Jixiang immediately retorted, "I'm not tight." Okay, you're not tight," and so Xia Yulu rephrased himself, "just a little dry." Yet Liao Jixiang felt even more wronged. "I'm not dry, how could I be dry?" He was genuinely anxious, so much so that tears were swelling in his eyes as he stubbornly tugged Xia Yulu's finger outward. "We've done it for so many times, and I was always able to." Seeing him like this only made Xia Yulu want to make love to him with all his might. "Do you really," he swallowed hard, "want it that much?" Dense beads of sweat were gathering on Liao Jixiang's forehead, who was now shamelessly wriggling his waist in front of Xia Yulu. "I do." He even rubbed his tiny nipples against Xia Yulu's firm chest. "I want you like that." Xia Yulu didn't let him finish. With a sudden jolt, he flipped him over, one of his hands supporting Liao Jixiang's belly, and the other hand guiding his hardness, pressing it between those snow-white buttocks and consistently sinking himself into it. He watched as Liao Jixiang's butt cheeks spread apart, so far apart that they finally revealed the half-opened entrance within. That seductive opening was surrounded by a ring of dark red folds, which was once not as mature. The color now was only caused by Xia Yulu, who devoted himself into it, grinding it night after night, so that anyone seeing it could unmistakably tell that Liao Jixiang had intimate coupling with men. Yang Chun. Staring at that patch of dark red, Xia Yulu couldn't contain himself anymore and began forcing himself inside. Liao Jixiang had indeed underestimated his size. If he was not carefully supported by Xia Yulu, he would have really collapsed from his weakened legs. With tears and snivels smearing all over his face, Liao Jixiang cried out without holding back, as if it was his first time. By then, Xia Yulu had finally buried himself completely into Liao Jixiang. He could feel his mind swelling and sinking in a daze, and he finally understood the old saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Just as he was about to thrust properly, Liao Jixiang suddenly called out, "Ch Chun Chu, I need to pee." Thinking that he had just entered and it was too soon for him to pee, Xia Yulu reached around to the front of Liao Jixiang, gently rubbing and comforting that mishaped narrow opening as he penetrated him from behind. "Go ahead, pee on my hand." Yet Liao Jixiang's entire body became tense as he tried to hold it in. The more he did, the better it felt for Xia Yulu. Plain penetrations were no longer enough for him. So, he lifted Liao Jixiang's legs, folding them in front of Liao Jixiang to curl him up, and hugged him against his chest as he pounded violently into him. Liao Jixiang couldn't possibly survive such rough actions. Drop after drop, urine was already dripping and collecting by his feet. He cried as he implored, let me pee." Xia Yulu's thrusts echoed crisply in the room. As he thrusted into Liao Jixiang, he would jolt his body upwards before letting him come down again. He had never tried a standing position like this before, nor had he ever seen it in one of those erotic art books. Just like himself, Liao Jixiang was also pointing his own elbows at his chest, aggressively stimulating his nipples despite his seeming contradictory effort to still cover his lower parts with his palms. The chamber pot was right in front of them, next to the table and the tall mirror. Still thrusting in, Xia Yulu slowly walked them over. Liao Jixiang had been shamefully leaking along the way, and when he was finally aiming at the pot, a large stream was finally released. While he was peeing, Xia Yulu paused his movements. Suddenly, Xia Yulu sensed something flickering on the left. He took a glance to the side. It was a mirror, slightly tilting yet still clearly reflecting their indecent act. Xia Yulu immediately stole a glance at Liao Jixiang. As he was positioned in front of him, Liao Jixiang seemed not to have noticed yet, so Xia Yulu peeked furtively into the mirror, at the region where they joined as one. It was such an obscene color of flesh. Compared to Liao Jixiang's tiny hole, he was unbelievably large, his dark, massive hardness stuffed into Liao Jixiang's pitiably small opening. Very abruptly, he began thrusting violently upwards, his every move real and intense. Liao Jixiang was still feeling listless as he had just finished peeing. Under Xia Yulu's irrefutable violation, he twitched and wriggled intensely in his arms. From the mirror, Liao Jixiang appeared as erotic as a lustful serpent, making Xia Yulu gasp as he tightened his arms around Liao Jixiang. "Yang Chun, you're so lewd." Hearing this, Liao Jixiang first moaned vaguely. And then, as if recalling something all of a sudden, he began to struggle innocently, "I've only ever been with you, truly, only you." Naturally, Xia Yulu knew. He could tell from the dry tightness of Liao Jixiang's hole, but he teased him anyway, "I don't believe you." Liao Jixiang repeated in a daze, "Really, it's true." "Then say something nice." Xia Yulu quickened his pace, urging lasciviously, "Call me Gurgr." Liao Jixiang's face immediately flushed red, shy and reluctant, so Xie Yulu urged again, "Just once, just call me that once." Gurgr, like a good boy, Liao Jixiang obeyed, but Xie Yulu was still not satisfied. In fact, he went on to mumble a string of words, which were definitely not anything decent. Liao Jixiang evaded him in embarrassment, "I can't say it." Xie Yulu jolted him up and down even more vigorously. "Just whisper. Whisper it to me." He brought his ear close to Liao Jixiang's lips, eagerly waiting. After quite some time, Liao Jixiang finally leaned in. He must have said it, for he sent Xie Yulu into a mating frenzy, passionately and enthusiastically pounding harder and harder, forcing cries after cries, moans after moans out of Liao Jixiang's lips. End chapter.